Next up we have Rifhat Qureshi and Graham Getheridge from Share and their Enterprise, Employability and Enterprise, Business Methods and Historians.
Yes, thank you. Do you want me to do the slides?
Yeah, thanks. I'll give you a nod. First of all, my question is to you, what is the connection between heritage and cooking chips? You're about to find out. That's the question of the day, I hope. I don't know, what's the prize? Okay. Background. I've been doing careers and employability specifically for the School of History, Archaeology and Religious Studies now for 7 years. And I've also I've undertaken a Master's in Careers Guidance whilst I was at the school. And one of the things I researched a lot was the future of the graduate labour market. And part of my role is to go out and find and help students find work placements. And the feedback I got from the employers was sometimes students were a bit naive about the world of work, and especially in the heritage sector. Now, you know, a lot of our students in the School of History, Archaeology and Religious Studies do want to work in the heritage sector. It's one of the ones that they want to do. So, reading the news, I mean, one of the big challenges for museums and heritage sites, especially in the last 10 years since local authorities have taken away a lot of the funding, is that they've had some issues about staying open. I don't know if you know this, but you know, the National Museum of Wales down the road is quite a large institution, but many museums have less than 5 full-time members of staff. And when they have significant amounts of money taken out of their budget, they have real issues. So, of course, what are our students' perceptions of management? Managers float about museums, dusting off shelves, you know, they're organising a few exhibits, talking to the people that come in. So I thought, well, we need to address this problem. The problem is our students, you know, need to understand the labour market that they wish to enter. And we had a speed dating event. I do lots of different events. And one of the questions to the person that ran the museum up at Pontypridd was, what does your day look like? So she said, well, let me put it this way. Last week, the person who ran the cafe went sick, and I ended up cooking chips all week. And my job really didn't start till 5 o'clock. And our students said, so you cook chips? And she said, yeah, that's what I did most of last week. Now, I'm not suggesting our students go out and get a food hygiene certificate necessarily, although it wouldn't harm them. But this is the reality of the industry in which our students wish to go in. So how are we going to get this across to our students? I thought, and I used to run some business studies in a post-16 near Bath. I used to run some events, and one of them was like a stock market challenge. And I thought, well, why don't we try and replicate something where our students can learn the realities, and also how are we going to get them to network with these employers and to learn what it's like. So we thought we would come up, and I had a good relationship with Careers and Employability, so I came up with this idea, and Reese, who can't be here today, he jumped on it and said this is a really good idea. Now, the future of the labour market means that students who leave us, and in 10, 15 years' time, are going to have to be highly flexible and highly adaptable people. And although it's difficult to connect entrepreneurism with like going into the civil service, going into teaching, but most jobs in the future are going to require people to be entrepreneurial, if you think about it. So in some respects, you know, those skills, those entrepreneurial skills are going to be necessary. So these are the aims of the event that we discussed. Getting the students to turn up to the event is very difficult, especially as it's extracurricular and they don't get any credits for it. So I did have to sort of engage them, and it was the best 20 quid I spent at Lidl on various beverages, shall I say, and ordered a few pizzas in, and that helps them. It was at 5 o'clock, and if you look at the hierarchy of needs, being fed and having plenty of water or beer it covers those first few levels. So beer and pizza usually gets them to turn up. Okay, so we're going to explain about this event in a minute, but the results, this is probably the best 2.5 hours investment I have made in our students. The outcomes were absolutely fantastic. The employers became more, we invited the employers in, and we discussed this in a minute, and the employers became aware of where our students were coming from. And so a lot of times I say, especially when I do work placements, I say to employers, you've got to understand our students, they're only 19, they're 20, they don't know the world of work. So a lot of the employers expect them to come in highly motivated, knowing what to do, and sometimes we have to educate the employers as well. The participants, the learners, students, develop a sense of future skills. You know, when you're doing a history degree, do you really think you need to know how to fill in a bid writing activity, how to apply for grants? You know, all this is really is going to be really necessary in the future. For people in the heritage industry, and I would say in education. I mean, all you guys who are academics, you know, what you have to do, fill in grant forms, yeah? It's part of your job. It's not just about standing in front of students. So they demonstrated really higher order thinking skills. It really tested, because they had to, it was a problem-based activity, and they had to do it in 2.5 hours, and it focused, really focused them, especially after the second can of lager. They had fun, and I think that when you're trying to do extracurricular activities, it's got to be fun, isn't it? I mean, one of the challenges I've got is, how do you make an application form seminar fun and interesting? You know, we've got difficulties in trying to get them to turn up, and it doesn't mean they get credits all the time. And one of the things that I was really pleased about is I help students fill in application forms for proper graduate jobs. And some of them had put this session in their application form, that they had done it, and they had stated in their application for real jobs what they had learned from it. So I had that fed back to me in something that was really practical. I was really chuffed with that. And I also had feedback from a professional museum curator up in Mid Wales who said he went to a museum association event, and they were talking about our event in their meeting, which was quite good.
Oh.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so in terms of the reason why we did this event and why it was so relevant to SHARE students was, in case those of you are not familiar with the Enterprise and Startup team, we're part of the Careers and Employability strand of the university, and we support students who want to start their own businesses. And I think when we say that to students, and when we say that to people, they automatically think, well, I don't want to start a business. But one of the things that myself being an enterprise educator, I believe that a lot of the skills that you learn from being an entrepreneur or taking on those business skills, that commercial awareness, can help in everyday situations, and it can also help them in any discipline that they're in. So the idea of the event was really to develop that enterprising mindset, and in terms of the gap in the student experience, we felt that SHARE was really probably the least likely of disciplines to think of an entrepreneurial setting. So it really was getting students to think about new possibilities and thinking about how to create value. And for the Netflix generation, this is huge to them. Okay, they are less motivated by money and less motivated by, you know, external material items, although, you know, media would have us believe that. In actual fact, what they're all about is how to make a difference in the world. You know, they're out there to change the world, and we've really got to recognise that and help them on their way to doing that. So they're really curious towards, you know, creating that value out there for others and also for themselves. Responsive to problems and opportunities and making those connections. So that was another, you know, another skill that we really wanted them to develop. And also tolerant of uncertainty, ambiguity and failure. And I think that is really prevalent in everything nowadays. There's no certainty, regardless of what discipline you're in. I know of students who've done PhD in maths and then they've gone on and become karate tutors. So it's not about, you know, what discipline they come out with or what education they get. It's about their ability to adapt and to problem solve. So the event itself was 2.5 hours long, and the structure of it was really to introduce the brief and then introduce the concept canvas. So I'll go into more of this in just a minute, but it's just a tool that we use in enterprise and startup to get students to really start thinking about the problem that they're trying to solve with the business skills that they need. But this could apply anywhere. I believe, you know, entrepreneurs and educators are the superheroes of the world. So I believe that, you know, this idea of the concept canvas, this tool, can be used in any of the other disciplines. But I'll introduce you to that in just a minute. Time working with industry professionals as well. So we allowed the students some time to actually speak to working professionals and actually find out what really goes on inside these professions. And then we also, along the course of the event, we put interventions in. So again, like a real life situation where life is unpredictable, things can't be, you know, planned out always. We threw little curveballs at them, in which we called interventions, and then they needed to resolve those. And then finally, they had to have a 60-second pitch to the industry professionals. So it was like a mini business in 2.5 hours. So the challenge we gave them was, you know, the museum has experienced local council budget cuts, and again, this is, you know, real life. And the students were needing to restructure the museum to increase visitor numbers. So again, a real life problem that they needed to solve. So just really quickly, this is the concept canvas that can be used, and we really got them to think about some of these elements, and the outcome really was that the cash output was more than obviously the cash input here. And, you know, regardless of whether we're in share or whether we're in NCAP or whether we're in healthcare, ultimately we do need to make, you know, enough to sustain ourselves. We need to keep going, and this was something that the SHARE students identified. We then, through this intervention to them, they could invest, so they've got the opportunity to, you know, to use their resources in either one of these ways, and they really needed to make a decision. So that, again, if we go back to interpersonal skills, is decision making, okay, and getting them to be assertive in their decision making as well. You know, they needed to understand that this is what they all need to do out there in industry. We then gave them some bad news, and that bad news came in the form of really what's happening in a real life event that's happening in the heritage sector. And last year, that bad news came in the way of an employee complaining to the local press about gender inequality. So again, students needed to have a level of empathy and a level of understanding of how they would deal with that situation should there be an industry and that come up.
Can I just mention?
Yeah, sorry.
When this was going on, the industry professionals were going amongst the students and asking them questions about their decision making. And the year before last, when we did it, we took away £100,000 of their budget because we said the local authority was going through. And do you know what their first decision was? Make staff redundant. And of course, the professions were going, well, who's going to cook the chips? Who's going to man the door? Who's going to do the exhibitions? And suddenly it dawned on them that actually making people redundant wasn't the panacea for all ills in museums and any other organisation. And so that was quite funny. So the experts actually challenged them and then the experts going amongst the students when they were making these decisions. We had 5 teams of about 5 people, were asking them questions. So the experts who were going to judge the best pitch at the end were listening to their decision making and their conversations, which was quite good.
Thank you. So the next part, the next intervention we gave them was about the National Lottery and really giving them the opportunity to bid for additional funding. And again, you know, students might not think that they need to do these sort of things when they think about what they're studying, but getting them to understand how communication works as well, because ultimately when you're writing a bid, you're communicating what it is that you want and what you're looking for and why you want it, and justifying what it is that you want. And so getting students to think about how they would write this this bid, this was another key skill for them to learn. And then finally, presentation skills came in the way of pitching to the professionals. So the whole approach of this event was not that they take away just entrepreneurial skills, but how those interpersonal skills are really embedded into entrepreneurship and really how it would translate into their industry and where it would translate. And then just really quickly, in terms of student feedback, it's always great to have good student feedback, but I think the most the one that I really like there is that it was brilliantly fun, and we talk about engaging students, we talk about making it relevant, we talk about it being authentic. Well, they want fun. Okay, students want to have fun. They don't want to come and learn something that's boring and not relevant to them in the real world. So trying to match that up can be quite challenging. And then back to you.
So basically, to finish, this was a really, really good 2.5 hours problem-based learning activity. And I don't know any subject where we couldn't do something like this. And if anyone would like to challenge me on that, I'd be quite happy to. It's good that students can learn beyond the lecture theatre, their specialist subject, and learn how this is applied to the real world. And being a careers and employability person, I think that's essential. It was self-directed. They could do more or less whatever they wanted within the law in terms of how they, what they wanted to do with this museum, and they came up with some really, really good imaginative suggestions. And in the future, then, we're going to run this again this year, and hopefully it'll get better and better, and hopefully I won't have to spend so much money on alcohol. Any questions?